Well, I want to welcome you to this week's episode of the CVC Home Service Success Network. This is sponsored by CVC Success Group, and we do this every week when possible, unless there's a scheduling conflict. And we do it to share ideas, share concepts, share processes with you, our people that are listening to us. And whether you're listening to us live or you're listening on the replay, we appreciate you being here. It's truly an honor, a privilege, and a pleasure to be able to speak to managers such as you every single week on this medium. So, what we try to do is come up with interesting topics that can be something to help you move to that dream destination you have. And this week is no different because today we're going to talk about one of my favorite things to do, which is a SWOT meeting. And a SWOT meeting is spelled SWOT. And that stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And the strengths and the weaknesses, those are interior issues. The opportunities and threats, those are external things. But as you look at this, and if you do research, you're going to find that a majority of the leading Fortune 500 companies in America, they go through a SWOT process on an annual basis. What's really interesting, you can Google these SWOTs. You can pull up an Amazon SWOT. You can pull up a Southwest Airlines SWOT, a Boeing Airlines that makes planes SWOT. It's really interesting when you get into this. So today, we've invited a special guest. This isn't the first time he's been with us. And what drove this was last week, we broadcast on Thursday of last week because I was going to a meeting that afternoon in Asheville, North Carolina, which was the annual winter meeting of the North Carolina Chimney Sweep Association. And Phillip Stoiller, who is our guest today, was one of the speakers there. And he was speaking about using SWOT as part of your strategic planning tool and went through a half a day presentation. And to be honest with you, as many SWOTs as I've facilitated in my career, it was still an eye-opening experience because I was able to learn from Phillip some new ideas to put into that. So who is Phillip Stoiller? Phillip is the president, chief operating officer, chief executive officer of Saver Systems. But more importantly, if you go into his background, he worked for, I'm going to call it a mind center for business owners in Dayton, Ohio, that is called Aileron. This was a building and a facility that was built by a gentleman by the name of Clay Mathiel, who was a very rich gentleman who had built a business and sold it for billions, that's correct, billions of dollars. And he was really vested in helping build business owners and to a higher level. So that was Philip's background. He was, I'm going to call him a coach there, a consultant, an instructor, a teacher, all kinds of different things. So I've invited Phillip in here today to give us his unique outlook on SWOTs. Why should you do it? What's the purpose of it? And how can this benefit you and your company in building your operation to the level that you aspire to? So, Phillip, first of all, I appreciate you taking time out of your day today. I told Phillip last week, I said, hey, man, I want to get you on a broadcast. And I sent him an email right after the meeting. I said, hey, can I get you on next Friday? I think it's a hot topic. So I appreciate you being here today, brother. So Absolutely. Tell us about it. So let's start. Why is a SWOT so important for a company to use as part of their plan for building their strategic plans into the future? Why is it so important?
Yeah, it's so important because I'll say that the piece of a strategic planning process that brings the information to the decision makers that they may or may not have that they need in order to make tough choices. And the way we taught it is at Aileron is that strategic planning it's kind of a system. It's not just a one thing and one idea, but it's a system where each step sort of empowers the other. And I would describe it as a second piece of the system that comes after the first. So when we taught it, we taught visioning as the first step, which is being really clear and defining for yourself and for your team where it is that you're trying to go as a business. What does success look like? in a sense of a metaphor of a trip, it's where are you going? Like you're going to Miami, you're going to Houston, right? You got to get clear on that, or you might find yourself somewhere halfway in between, or maybe in completely the other direction. But once you've defined where you want to go, what's really important before you start acting on that is to figure out what you know, what you don't know, that might either help you get there faster or might prevent you from getting there whatsoever. We would call those things strengths or weaknesses. There's things along the way that there's sort of tools in your tool bag that might sort of accelerate your progress to that ideal destination, or potential things that might really slow you down. And so I think it's important, because if you're blind to those things, either your strengths or your weaknesses, your ability to plan the most efficient a trip to that destination is going to be definitely less than it could be if you spent some time taking a look at it.
Yeah, that's right. And you've got to set these up. You can't just call them. How important is it that you have someone come in to facilitate this that is not necessarily a member of the team, that can look at this without an opinion coming in? How important is that, Phillip?
It depends. I'll say this. If you're trying to get the most detailed thought out of more than just your own head, super important. And I'll say this, if you're not, consider trying to get all the thoughts out of people's heads other than your own. So I've seen leaders do this, where they put just their own gut and intuition on a page, and they call that good. All right. There's a problem with that, because we see from a certain vantage point kind of only what you can see from one angle. And that tends to leave us still quite a bit blind to all the other things that are out there. And so when I would do SWOTs with leaders in various industries, I would encourage them to try to look at it from as many different directions as you can. The metaphor I used to teach people, it's like when you see the pro golfer on the green and they're lining up that like difficult birdie putt, they don't just sit behind the ball and look at it. They do that, but then they kind of walk around the hole. You've seen them do that. They take looks at different angles, right? They're trying to figure out that lie so they can understand how that ball will go through that complex series of angles and tilts, right? And when I would teach SWOT, I would say, I think you need to do that. I would tell people you need to walk around the hole if you want to have your best shot at getting that birdie putt. And here's how you walk around the hole. You rely on what other people can see as much, if not more, than what you see yourself. And the more different perspectives you can bring into that you can consider, the more you're going to understand the lie between you and the place you're trying to go.
Gotcha. So Cheryl, let's start with you on the roundtable questions this morning. Cheryl has actually participated with me. She's traveled sometimes when a client requests her presence there to participate in the SWOT. So she's been an observer. She's helped me conduct these things. So Cheryl, what would you ask Phil today about in the area of SWOT meetings and our discussion today? What would be your first question for Phillip?
Phillip, do you think a lot of times that you find a business owner that's really biased about what's about this going on, and how do you get past that point in your discussions with him?
Yeah, I mean, the answer is yes. And if you were to ask me how many times, my answer would literally be every single time. Humans are notoriously susceptible to bias, and that's just kind of built into our DNA, who we are. And as I said before, we kind of have one look at it. The tough thing about doing something like a SWOT, particularly when you're talking about your strengths and your weaknesses, is getting your own ego out of the way. Your ego is going to tend to make you sort of see things like this with blinders on, right? And you kind of can't see beyond the things that make you, I'll say, feel secure in who you are. The people who can really get to sort of really effective strategic plans are the ones who say, I'm going to let that aside. No matter how challenging the information is to hear, I need to hear it. Because if I hear it, I can actually become better. And so the biases that we typically bring in is we want to believe that we're good leaders. We want to believe that we're, inspiring our team, and we want to believe that our customers respect us, and we want to believe that we're treating people well and people are receiving us well, and we do our best to do so. But most of us are not batting 1,000 on that, right? In various crowds. In fact, I don't think I've met a person who's able to bat 1,000 when it comes to that. So yes, it's hard. It's hard to get that ego out of the way, but if you can, and you can actually hear what I'll say, if you're running a multi-truck business and you can see what your first tech sees about your strengths and weaknesses, been with you for 15 years, and if you can see what the guy that's been working with you for 2 weeks, if you can see all of that, all of those assessments, doesn't mean they're right and you're wrong. It just means they see things you don't. And as you're trying to paint the entire picture, if you have all of that you can bring in, you're going to get the most accurate picture you can. That's the walking around the hole. And candidly, you can get it from customers. If you can get it from, if you have, bank relationships, if you have business partnerships in terms of suppliers, the more of that you can get, the better. The question is, how do you do it efficiently, right? Because none of us have the time to do a PhD level dissertation type of thing. It's how do you get it done quick so that you can inform yourself as efficiently as possible.
Yeah. And also, Phillip, the manager or the owner, they have to be willing to come out of their comfort zone, because they may hear things that they're not aware of. It may be shocking to them. In fact, I've done SWOT meetings. At the end, the owners told me, I just learned things about my own company I had no idea. I had no idea the frustration. I had no idea that this problem, excuse me, was going on in the company. So, Josh, you've been a person that SWOTs have been conducted in a company that you manage. What would you ask Phillip today about this subject?
Well, I was going to ask about threats, but I wanted to just build real quick on what you said. I have a client that you've done a SWOT for, and one of the things they said was the people that are the chirpiest were quiet in the SWOT. And then the quiet people finally felt like they had a voice. So the people that were everyday complainers, for some reason, got really quiet. Like, because maybe I think that's a place where like the chirpy BS goes away to some extent. The complainers, or how, because some of them just don't know how to handle any stress, but when they're put in front of the whole group, its attitude seems to change. That was one of their takeaways. As an owner who went through it, it was extremely painful the first time I went through it. Blood pressure was up. You learned a lot of it about communication. That was a big one for me. I think communication usually seems to be one of the biggest ones from what I've heard, is communication. But I kind of want to talk about like threats really to the company. Look at Lee out there killing it. How much are threats internal versus external? Like bad management versus like real threats to a company? Is it, of course there's factors like rising product costs and insurance and things like that, but how much of it's internal versus external? Because I think a lot of people think, Jones, the guy down the street's undercutting me. But I think it's way more than just what causes a business to not be profitable, is way more beyond that.
Okay. Phillip, you want to address that? Because I want to also give my opinion. Go ahead with yours.
Yeah. So to me, it's a bit academic, whether it's a threat or a weakness or a strength or an opportunity. And when I would work with small businesses, I wouldn't really care very much if they got it labeled right. But what I cared most about is whether they considered things both inside and outside. So technically, academically, the strength and the weakness, the S and the W, is it's supposed to be inside the company. So if there's trouble with your culture, that'd be a weakness. It feels threatening though when you're a leader, no doubt, right? No doubt. And technically, the opportunity and the threat, O and the T on the bottom, is supposed to be outside the organization. Again, I didn't really care so much if people labeled it as right, as long as they looked deeply in and extensively out. That's where the real gold is. And in the North Carolina Guild meeting, I even shared that sometimes, again, just as a way of getting us to view things from as many perspectives as we're able, I would sometimes teach people, okay, let's let the inside outside thing go And let's use the SW to think about past and present. So past and present things that have occurred in your business or that you have in your business. And then let's use the O and the T to think about future. Now that's academically not correct, but I think it's still really powerful. Think about what do you already have that's helpful? What would you want that's helpful, right? What do you already have that's hurting you? What might happen in the next 60 days that might hurt you, right? So that's my answer on it. It should be sort of seen as, if you look at that, well, I got it here. If you look at this diagram, you'll see, maybe you can put the slide up, that you have strengths, that's the S, and then you have W, and then you have O, and then you have T. This is supposed to be inside, outside, but I also taught past and present, future. And then obviously the strengths and opportunities is supposed to be positive things, or I would say things that get you to your end destination faster, more efficiently. And then the other side is supposed to be the things that slow you down, hurdles, roadblocks. Yeah, there you go. Things that are going to trip you up along the way.
Yeah. Sorry, it just took me a minute to get it up and manipulating up this stuff. But like I said, this is showing a SWOT matrix by the different segments. But I think that Phillip just hit the key thing. The key thing, whether it is identified as a threat or a weakness, is that we bring it out into the open. We start discussing, why is this a threat? And then what you've also got to do is come up with the resolution of how to do this. One of the things that I've started doing is, as we identify these weaknesses in the company or the threats, is breaking the group up into small work groups, okay? As we break it up in small work groups, then assign them, okay, you got 3-5 people in this work group, you got 20 minutes. Come up with a solution. And then we take time that we explain it. Now, this is not going to cover everything. You're going to come up with what are the most important things that you can cover, and what are the changes that we can do immediately. We got to be careful about talking 5 years down the road. We got to come in, what do we do today? It's always good to have this end game of where we want to go to, but it's just like the Rockefeller principles and what we call rocks in the book Traction. What are the small things we're going to do to get there? Because so often people concentrate on the big picture and it's so overwhelming, they can't get anything done. Phillip, would you agree with what I'm saying?
100%. It's absolutely true. It's a tool designed to help you achieve focus at the end of the day. And we would always teach at Aileron, the ideal process to get to focus is one in which you take your own perspective, which is fairly narrow, and then you consider the views of as many other perspectives as you can, but they don't just leave it there, because that's very unfocused. But then after having considered it, and maybe you have 10 different strengths from customers, employees, supply partners, et cetera, you hone in on the top 2 or 3. Now that's not meant to sort of ignore the other ones, but one of the things I taught in the class at North Carolina is if I take all of these, let's say, weaknesses, and I try to punch a hole through it, I'm not going to succeed. But if I narrow it down to it, I'm not going to do this. I want to destroy my workbook. But I take it down to a page, I can punch right through it, right? And that's the focus in it. We call that process the process for obtaining success, where you start narrow, get wide, and then get narrow again. But you don't want to skip that middle piece where you consider all the options that are out there.
Yeah, very true. I'm going to bring this slide back up here that we were looking at a while ago. Bring it back up a minute, because I want to talk about this. Let me get this slide back up here. It's going to take me just a second.
Also, I want to kick one in there. I think people, when they work with the big rocks, they get so overwhelmed that they can't even think about the small ones. I mean, the one thing that we always talk about, start with the one thing that'll make the most difference.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, go ahead, Phillip. I'm sorry.
I totally agree. And I talked about 2 of the steps, but there are 2 other steps, right? Between visioning where you want to go and then analyzing internally, externally, present, future, the things that get you there faster or slow you down. The next part of it is prioritizing. It's saying I can't fix everything that's broke all at the same time. And I can't, utilize every advantage that I might have all at the same time. I just don't have the marketing resources for, don't have, we run in a world where things are limited. All right. And, so prioritizing is next. It's saying, what are the things that are the most important for me to fix that might prevent me from getting where I want to go, or the things that are most helpful in getting me where I want to go. That prioritizing part is that going from the wide back to the small. Now, some of those big things that you prioritize are still going to be big, which is why there's a fourth step. And that fourth step is execution. And there are a lot of different tools out there in terms of executing. Most of the time, though, the concept of executing is taking that big rock from being a big idea, like something like improve our company culture. Big rock gives me no idea what I'm supposed to do next. Like, if I want to do that, what should I do next? Right. And if I delegate that to someone's going to say, what does that even mean? Right. Okay. Thanks, boss. Like, what am I supposed to do? Right. So getting to the point where you can execute is what you're talking about, is where you break it down into tiny chunks. We use an implementation plan at Aileron, but the system that you're talking about is also a very powerful one. And what we would teach people to do is break it down until it's such a small piece that you can get it done in an hour or two. Make it an hour or two big. Because if it's an hour or two big, you'll do it. You have an extra hour or two occasionally. If it's 10 hours big, you won't do it. Nobody's got 10 hours. Again, if it's 10 hours big, it's really hard to delegate because people still won't understand it. But if it's an hour or two, you can do it yourself, and you can also delegate it to someone and expect them to be able to accomplish it successfully. So that might be, to give you an example of improve our culture. Big, it's a priority, but still too big. You might say, what's the next, what's a thing I can do to work on that? Well, maybe it's having an all hands, plan a monthly all hands lunch, right? Figure out what day of the week and how I'm going to cater it. You're starting to get into that. I could probably get that done for this year in an hour. I could probably send out calendar invites for all the days. I could probably have a cater, whatever, right? Maybe we'll go to a restaurant. You're starting to get it to the point where you can actually execute it.
Yeah. Phillip, I think that what you have to do is also, and that's what I pulled up this slide, is how do you get the discussion started? I mean, that's critical so you can get people narrowed in. You just said the key thing. Okay, we need to improve our culture. We got to focus in on what are the things that we can do to make that change. Yeah. So these are conversations to have. And this is where I feel like having a facilitator that can bring this to light and bring the discussion is so important. Yeah. And I see a lot of people without that effect, you're just not going to come out at the end. But here's my question to you. What kind of preparation would you tell someone they need to do with the people that are attending prior to the meeting? What would you tell them?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So if you're doing this with a facilitator, where you're asking a facilitator to draw other people's opinions out about strengths and weaknesses, I think you need to be aware of the fact that they're within an organization where there's a boss or there's an owner, there's a hierarchy there. And when you're kind of at the top of that hierarchy from an org chart perspective, you may not understand the elements of psychology or the fear that might exist of giving clear and candid feedback. So there's a necessary thing for an owner to think through that with some empathy of understanding that if you're asking an employee to give tough feedback, they might be a bit afraid to do it. The best thing you can do as a leader on that is to speak to it and model it and say, Joe, you've been asked into this because you're an extremely important, leader here in our business. And I know there's things that I do well. I know there's things I do poor. I know there's things that we do well and that we do poor. And I'm asking you to provide this information because I really want to hear both. I really want to know what you think we're doing good, what we're doing bad. That opens the door for that person to be able to provide that feedback candidly. Because Josh, you mentioned just the idea of how sometimes the loud people get quiet and the quiet people get loud. Yeah. Well, that's information. What that would tell you is that for some people, it's much easier to share their ideas and assessments laterally than horizontally. And as a leader, what I would do is sort of point that out to the person and ask the leader, why do you think that is? Yeah. Why do you think it is that person chooses to share the idea with a person who can't actually change it and not sharing it with you, the person who can. There's a reason.
Yeah.
There's a reason. It's hard to admit, but they're more afraid of you than they are of the other, right? And so you start to think through that lens. So 2 questions. I tell a leader, be prepared to hear stuff that's hard. Be prepared to face the things that make it harder for people to tell you things than it does for them to tell others. And do your best to sort of tear that wall down. Because if you want the best information, you got to get that wall down or you don't get good information. That's hard to do.
Phillip Stoiller, Koronovich, who was a member of the team there at Sabre Systems, retired very recently, big member. And anyway, he just made a statement. True, Jerry, the best SWOTs turn the management structure upside down as the people closest to the issues feel free to provide their input. And that's one of the things that Randy Pennington, a coach of Cheryl and myself, did. If you're going to affect change in the company, you have to involve the people in the change. You can't just dictate the change down. You got to involve them. So, but anyway, it's really amazing. I don't know how you do your SWOTs, but I use sticky flip chart sheets, like big sticky pads. And we're writing on these sheets with all different colors of ink and all these kind of things. And as we complete one, we put it on the wall. So when the meeting's over with, it's almost like a large mind map that you can see all the thoughts expressed in this meeting. That's the process I use. How do you take notes during this? What are you using in your experience?
I've done it a number of different ways. The sticky flip chart is it's one of the more powerful ways to do it. If you're in person with the group, as a facilitator, Aileron, we did it all the time with whiteboards or flip charts and different color sticky notes. I think that's a great way. Now, other ways to do it, if you have people that can't be all in a room at the same time, that's something we've done a few times here, is to do a SWOT survey. So get a free account with SurveyMonkey or something like that, and send out a survey link where it essentially says, list top 3 strengths, top 3 weaknesses as you see it. And piggybacking off of Stuart's comment, Stuart's exactly right. One thing somebody told me that stuck with me is that the further away you are from a problem, the sort of simpler it seems. It's sort of more frustrating it is to think, why can't people fix this, right? Because you're so far away that the solution seems simple. It seems simple because you don't know everything that's going on there, right? And the closer you are, so the further away you are from a problem, the easier the solution seems. But the closer you are to a problem, the more likely you are to actually successfully solve it. And so the goal is getting that right up and close, right next to the person in the front line or in the trench of a problem to say what they believe. And what we're really talking about is how do you bring all that in and then analyze it. Sticky notes are a great way to do it on a chalkboard. SurveyMonkey is an interesting thing we tested. We did a SurveyMonkey in our last planning cycle where we had multiple people do a SWOT from multiple different levels in the organization, from sort of manager, director of a department. I did it myself. Board member did it, which almost gives you like a 360 view of strengths, weaknesses, and threats. And then I plugged all of that into AI with titles and asked AI, out of all of this, what are the themes that are here? It was really interesting to sort of see how it viewed that from different positions. But ultimately, that's the goal, is to get all those different views so that you can see it from multiple different perspectives.
And I agree, taking that information, feeding it into an AI agent that could compile this. And it's really amazing. I did it this morning and went through, it was 685 pages of information, fed it all in the AI and asked it, tell me what this is telling me. And it gave me the results, came back. This was less than a minute with artificial intelligence that personally, if I'd had, it would have took me 2 weeks as a human being to put that all together. So using these newer tools, open it up. So Cheryl, let's go back to you. Time for one more question. Anything you would ask Phillip today on here about our subject matter?
Basically, one thing that's near and dear to my heart is when you're dealing with it, do you find out that when you're dealing with different personalities, they're coming out in a whole different perspective as someone else might do?
Yeah.
Are they looking at it with different lenses, or are they just not admitting a lot of it?
I think they're looking at entirely different lenses. So one of the the personality tools that both my wife and I like the most is the MBTI, what you can get on the website. I think it's I forget the name of the URL, but essentially it's the I think 16 personalities is a free one, but it breaks things down by, is a person more tendency to be an extrovert or an introvert? Are they more, they have more of a tendency to see sort of the details of a situation or the big picture, or do they have a tendency to sort of value sort of the relational or human impact or the logic, right? And that theory is based on an assumption that we are kind of wired in different ways. And so if I'm a big picture guy, I'm going to see different things than if I'm a, really good at laying out the details guy. Or if I'm a feeler, I'm going to see the human relational interactional part of it versus T, maybe the more logical part of it. So no, I think it gets back, Cheryl, to your original question of bias, right? And can personality itself introduce bias? My answer is definitely, it definitely does. And, I think I forget which one of you asked me also that, how do you prep a business owner for this, that, maybe doesn't see the strength in it. Well, let me say it like this. If you're a business owner and you're not sure you see the strength in it, and you were talking to me at Aileron and you told me, here's my top 3 strengths, what I would have been trying to tell you is, as evidenced by what? Why do you believe that? How do you know that's true? Prove it to me. Prove it. And I didn't mean to be petulant, although it probably came across that way, but it's designed to pop that narcissistic bubble of, I know it, I see it. Because when you push into that, and you can do this to yourself, because I need to do this to myself. When you push into that, you start to realize, oh, yeah, why do I believe that to be true? Well, it's just the way things are. Not good enough, right? What tells you that it's true today? If it was true 10 years ago, doesn't mean it's still true. That's how we talk to people at Aileron, not to challenge them, but to help sort of expand their mind, be willing to look at things from multiple perspectives.
Okay. Can I go again, Jerry?
Say that again.
Can I go again?
Yeah, sure. I was going to ask you, did that answer your question or anything else?
Well, I deal with DISC. I've been doing that for many, many years. And it kind of does the same thing that you're talking about. A D personality has the traits that they don't listen. Mm-hmm. They don't do certain things, and they're hard to change. So as we go through, just like you're talking about, the personalities, especially the business owners, I can deal with the personality of the employees because they kind of listen. You get a business owner and tell him you don't know how to listen, they totally freak out. So I think that should, at a lot of times, needs to, like you say, be addressed before you go in, so you can tell them part of their job is just to sit there and listen.
Yeah, that's so good. And Cheryl, I love the DISC as well, particularly as it relates to, for me, the part of it that I think is its super strength is how it relates to how people process things during tough conversations, the conflict models involved, and having a business owner sort of look the weaknesses or the threats sort of straight in the face without ego. that's generally, there's conflict, right? And as a coach, you have to push back at that, and that's kind of a challenging thing where you got to develop some skill. But if you're a business owner, let me tell you this: if you're willing to put yourself through that process, you're going to see things more clearly than you do today. I promise you, you will. If you have a coach that challenges you and pushes you, they're doing it because they want you to succeed, and they're doing it because they want you to have the best assessment that you can have of the things that are either going to make your life and your team's lives better or possibly worse, right? Mm. If you can approach it with that, like sort of a tough love kind of concept, my coach is giving me some tough love here, it'll help you. It'll help you get ahead.
Yeah, that's true. And so you'll know that ability of high Ds to listen is something they can work on and conquer, because I greatly resembled that remark a while ago, young lady. So anyway, I understand, but it is.
You were my first test drive.
Yeah. Listening is a skill you definitely have to work on, listening to understand. In fact, that's one of the things I've had to work the hardest on, is just shut up and listen to people. It's been a very hard thing for me to learn, but I've been very successful at this. Josh, what'd be the last thing you'd ask Phillip in today's conversation?
So I know the few times I've gone through this, there was a lot of paper written out, a lot of notes. How would you suggest, I would say, digesting it and focusing on fixing it? Because you can't fix everything. Can't fix everything in a year. 6 months from now, you're going to forget about it.
Yep.
So how do you suggest taking all these giant pieces of paper that are written? I mean, we used to have a room covered in them when we were done, and focus and drill down on it.
Yeah, that's a great question. Jerry, would you be able to put that second page up that I presented from North Carolina?
Sure. Yeah, hang on just a minute. Let me get it up for you here, okay? So I got to share my screen again. Second page.
Yeah, the one that doesn't only just sort of lay out the strengths and weaknesses, but starts to talk about what do we do about it, right?
Okay.
So Josh, it's a great question. And as I was talking about that process where you take a narrow perspective and then make it broad and then start to bring it back together again. The way that I was trained to do that and the way that I thought was most successful is, again, to push for top 2 or 3 strengths, top 2 or 3. And Jerry, it's going to be just underneath the I think maybe slide 10, if I'm not mistaken.
Tell me when to stop.
Keep going. Yeah, it's going to be, keep going a little bit more.
Jerry, hit it in present mode because it's a little hard to read when you're not in present mode.
I am. As soon as I get it up, I will.
Next one. Yep, you're almost there. There you go.
Okay,
Yep,
I'm going to enlarge it up, okay? Is that better?
Yeah, it's better. And this is a simple tool, but it's extremely powerful, which is to say, don't just stop by observing these things. Like, what are you going to do about it? Right. And those quiet people in the room, this is a good thing to challenge them to get back into that sort of more active, engaged mode, is to say, okay, so we have this weakness. Our culture's not good, whatever. Our sales are poor, you name it, whatever the weakness is. All right, now what do we need to start doing to correct it? Or we have the strength. So how are we going to leverage it? What do we do with that strength? And I would have people brainstorm on that. So we limit ourselves top 2 or 3 strengths, and I'll sometimes use a dotocracy. Those of you that haven't heard that, a dotocracy is if you get the whole sticky board sort of covered in notes, you have everybody there vote, and everybody has 3 dots. And so you put a dot on the ones that you like, or 2 dots, or if you really feel strongly about one, you put all 3 dots, and kind of the most dots wins. So whichever sticky note has the most dots on it is number 1. That's our strength number 1. And everything that below 3 is just set aside, because candidly, we know we're going to come back to this. We're going to come back to this, next quarter. We're going to come back to this next year. So it doesn't mean we're going to ignore it forever. It just means that these aren't going to do as much good for us as the one with the most dots. And then you start saying, okay, this top strength, how can we put that to play for us? And you have people start brainstorming on that, which is going away from observation to starting thinking about prioritizing and execution. And when we would pick priority issues with our clients today, learn on how we do it at Sabre Systems, we would very much look to this sort of right-hand column for the things that could be priority issues. And we consider all of them, all the how to leverages, how to corrects, how to pursue. But that column right there is the gold in terms of, how do you start prioritizing the work that you want to do?
Okay. So, Josh, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I love that dot matrix. It reminds me of a card game we play. You basically bet on the people's emotions, but no, that's not just you.
Okay, Phillip, look at that question up there from Lee Rolfe. Why does someone seem to quit or get fired right after the SWOT, or is that just us?
Well, I think there's probably 2 questions in that single question. I would say you might want to look at both of them individually. There could be a different cause for each, right? Why does someone quit right after a SWOT? Well, most of the time when people quit, the way I taught at Aileron, it's a tough way to face it. When a person quits, they fired you as a leader. Now, the other question is, why did they get fired? Well, you fired them, right? It's both true that a follower can fire their leader as much as so that a leader can fire a follower. And so I would on the first question, why did they fire you? To be honest with you, they stopped believing you could make their life better. At the end of the day, you didn't maintain their confidence that you could help them get to where they wanted to go. That's why they fired you, right? And to be honest with you, the other way, when you fired them, you stopped believing that they could help you and your team get to where you want to go. You lost confidence in them.
Got you. I understand. Well, here's the whole thing, folks. The SWOT process is one that can realistically move you. But as an owner, as a manager, you're going to have to be open to what the team says. Because as a rule, like I said, I have clients and we do this every year for Phillip. Every single year we do that. In fact, we're heavy in the SWOT season right now. Here's another one that's commented. I'm going to pull Chuck Roydhouse up. SWOT is a game changer. People quit because they do not want accountability. Chaos allows them to underperform. But again, it's a process that can help you build. Josh, did you have something to say? You hold two fingers up.
I did. Well, you remember when we gave a manager all the accountability he was asking for, he turned around and quit an hour later.
Yeah, he wanted to be able to operate under his own authority. We gave him that. Within an hour, he resigned from the company, Phillip. How about that? You know, that's kind of the stuff that goes on. So Stuart says, great forum today, guys. And it truly was. You know, Stuart's a guy that, you know, we all know, and you've worked with him closely and that kind of stuff. But again, if you have a desire to take your company to the level you aspire, you got to be able to analyze what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, what your opportunities are, and your threats. And I can guarantee you, if you do this and look at each year along and as it progresses, like Lee said, there's a lot of companies that those people are actually asking, when are we going to have the next SWOT? When are we going to have the next SWOT? They're looking forward to it. They're looking forward. And after it's over with, most of them agree. It was a very good experience. It allows them to get the word out. So, Phillip, anything else you would say about SWOT meetings before we hang up for today?
Well, just one more thing. As hard as it is, I would challenge every business owner to never take themselves off the hook. One of the things that Clay taught us to teach business owners, if there's something broken in your business, you need to ask what you did to create it. And you got to accept and own the fact that you were always at the cause of that event. So even if we go to this, you know, the manager that quit because he was given accountability, it's easy to just sort of point your finger at that guy and then walk away. But the goal is, and the really tough goal to get to is, what did I do that created that situation in the first place? Why was that guy here? Why was that guy promoted? What did I do? Now, maybe you don't find something, but the harder you push yourself to answer the question of in what ways did I contribute to that, as opposed to just that guy did it and he's a loser. The more you're going to improve yourself, the more you're going to see things that you don't see right now that can help you get better. And that's where the challenge is. That's like getting that ego out of the way part that we talked about at the beginning.
Very, very true. To quote a former coach of mine and Cheryl's, respect him greatly. Hard-nosed guy. He tells it like it is. And Lee just said, puts it up here, if it's your fault, it's easier to fix. But Larry Wingate used to have a thing that he would say, if your business sucks, it's because you suck. You're letting the crap go on. You're not setting the right example. You've got to bear down. You've got to set the example. You got to be open, and you got to be open to where your people want to go and build a superstar team of players. You agree, Phillip?
100%.
That's
I
it.
do.
Well, anyway.
And Jerry, let me say this.
Sure.
Sometimes my business has sucked because I suck. At Permacolumn, sometimes we sucked at things because I was contributing. So I'm not coming from a position where I think that I'm above this. I'm the doctor that needs to take his own medicine, truly.
That's it. So anyway, if you've joined us today on live or on the replay, we certainly appreciate it. We hope this has been a time that's been of value to you. You can reach out to Phillip. You want to know more about SWOTs and the things that can be involved. He can be reached at Saver Systems, and that's an easy way to get in touch. He'll be glad to answer a question for you. If you want to put this together, we facilitated a lot of these. We're doing them right now. Just did 3 last week. Got them more online for next week, and just about every week through the winter and into the spring. That's one of the things I'm doing. If you see me checking in an airport somewhere, leaving Charlotte, that's usually where I'm headed to this time of year. But I want to thank you. It's been so great to be able to share our ideas, our concepts with you, and the discussion, the questions coming back. Appreciate that a lot. It means the world to us. So we'll see you next week on the next episode of the CVC Home Service Success Network. We wish you a great weekend and a great week ahead. And hopefully it's getting a little warmer where you're at. I hope it is next week. This past week, I was in an area that was 20 below zero on Monday, okay? And that ain't made for a Southern boy to live. I'm going right back up north in the next few days. So we'll see you next week on the next episode of the CVC Home Service Success Network. Thanks for joining us. And Phillip, thank you so much for your input. It's so valued, my friend. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.